Middle Ages, a mighty nation arose on the borderlands between Europe and Asia. A land called Russia. A dynasty of Viking princes would lift Russia to greatness. The greatest of their line, Tsar Ivan the Terrible, would cast Russia into chaos. Out of the ashes would rise a giant, a new Russian empire, and the man who created it, sailor, soldier, carpenter, Tsar, Peter the Great. Russia. In the words of Winston Churchill, Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. Even today, years after the fall of communism, Russia retains a sense of mystery, and Russia's history remains a riddle.
There's no question in my mind that there is not one Russia, but that there are many Russias. And there's also very little question in my mind that there are many different Russian histories.
Is there a Russian nation? Yes, there is a Russian nation. What is it? 1,000 different things, depending on what you want it to be.
What makes Russia particularly different is firstly its sheer size. It is, after all, the biggest country on earth. And secondly, I suppose, the fact that it is Europe, but then again it isn't quite Europe.
The enigma that is Russia begins long ago, before Stalin, before Lenin, before the Reds took power. Russia was ruled by the Romanov dynasty for 300 years. Yet even the Romanovs are relative newcomers. The birth of the Russian Empire reaches back over 1,000 years to an age when history tangled with myth and a nation found its identity in a mystical faith. At its peak, the empire of the Tsars would span 1/6 of the globe. From the glories of St. Petersburg and Moscow, across the endless forests of Siberia, to the shores of the Pacific and beyond.
The land which is currently Russia is, of course, enormous.
The distance between one end of the Russian Empire and the other end of the Russian Empire is the same as the distance from Moscow to Chicago.
And part of the story of the history of Russia is the filling up of that space.
The land that would be Russia was never a single country. The Russian people, never a single race. Turks and Slavs, Mongols and Finns, Russia is a nation of many nations, a land not of one people, but of many different peoples.
All those groups have different patterns of settlement, obviously speak different languages, and have no sense of being part of a coherent land at all.
Before Russia became a nation, what connected the people of the Eurasian frontier were rivers, endless, awesome rivers.
Rivers were the highways, rivers were the roads, the rivers were the connections between the widely scattered populations. The rivers provided the force lines drawing people together.
The rivers are absolutely essential to the expansion of the Russians in every direction and to the creation of this kind of enormous state. Without the rivers, they could never have held it together.
In the 9th century, Viking warriors sailed down the rivers at the edge of Europe, the Dnieper, the Don, the Volga. The Vikings pioneered new trade routes, a shortcut to the riches of the Orient, Arabia, and Constantinople. Natives along the rivers called the Vikings the Rus, and as the Vikings battled and bartered their way to power, the frontier between Europe and Asia became known as the land of the Rus, Russia.